PTSD, emotional affect range, and relationships. We categorize or think about PTSD as simply that post-traumatic stress disorder, but there are many different routes in which one can develop PTSD. Somebody may have been involved with domestic violence or sexually abused. That's one form. Somebody may have gotten caught up in the litigation system and that whole different language terminology and the internal fear of whatever the ramifications of the event may be. That's another form of PTSD. Going out to combat and being in war and fighting and on the front lines, etc. That's another form of PTSD. Being a pilot in war and seeing planes going down around you, knowing that your buddies have just crashed, is another form of PTSD. When one has PTSD, it stretches the emotional capacity of a person so that their emotional response to others is simply not the same. One who has not struggled with PTSD, to use this as a demo, has the emotional range of this. So this person can connect and relate to others' sad stories of life or shared events in perhaps a more empathic way because their emotional range is within here and they understand. For someone who has had an emotional psyche that's been stretched, they may not have as much sensitivity or empathy for other people's stories because in their lives, they've just been expanded so far with trauma that this person's story that my dog died last week, which is a traumatic and event that one has to adjust to, and there's lots of sadness in it. For someone who's had a lot of PTSD, that dog event that I just described is in here, and the person with PTSD has gone beyond the emotional relationship of one who has not had PTSD and will relate much differently to that story of that person. So it might look like someone doesn't have empathy. Of course, oxytocin is involved in levels of empathy too. The higher your oxytocin level, the more ability there is to bond and create relationships. So it's a dynamic concept, this PTSD, and the different avenues that one gets there, again, whether it be through war or through domestic violence or through drug use or through verbal abuse. People can react to a seemingly neutral sentence in a, oh my God, freak out way, because their internal landmines within their body have been triggered. And the person talking is like, whoa, she's having a major reaction. What the heck? And the reality is it's because that internal landmine of psyche via the word choice has triggered a memory from whether it be a court system or a violent relationship, etc. And so it's hard to establish bonding when there's an incongruency with emotional response and what is being said to that person. And when someone gets flooded in PTSD, it's hard to step out of it and dialogue and say, can you please hold? I'm really triggered right now. You didn't do anything. Something's happening within me. I need to take a pause, a breather. Often what happens is things end up either really escalating and fighting happens, or people withdraw and retract and isolate from the world surround. It's an important concept to keep in mind because, again, back to the combat situation, somebody who's been in combat and has been on the lifelines of death is just not going to relate to the world in the same way as somebody, for example, who has been a housewife or a mother raising a child. So when vets return from being out in the field to social life and existence, and they walk around and they've just been in this complete other world, the world of normalcy is almost like flatlined. They've been exposed to intense adrenaline. They've seen some shocking things. They have a different relationship often to life and to death. And when I say life and death, that's just one level of the spectrum. If we look at Maslow's pyramid, for example, there are different levels of needs. And one with PTSD is on a level that just isn't congruent with someone with the majority of people who have not been through PTSD. So in any case, I think this is an important concept to talk about because it's important to know your PTSD triggers and also your emotional responses to people who have their own sad stories that you might not have empathy for, because by human default, we often compare ourselves to others. And especially if you've gone through an emotional ringer and you hear someone else's emotional story, it's nothing in comparison to the ringer that you've been through. So you just can't relate in the same way. And the friend or family member who is sharing the story may then think, this guy, this woman, she has no feelings. She doesn't care. She doesn't respond. So it's a dance. It's a dance to learn within yourself and with respect to the environmental surround to know what your triggers are, whether it's you're overly tired one day, or you haven't eaten well, or you haven't gotten out and about and had enough social interaction, and or it simply happens but in the moment of conversation. It's important to know yourself such that you can move into the direction of creating a relationship with somebody that is workable, that you can play around with the emotional responses and what affects you and what does not. So getting through PTSD, it's not a one-step process. Ibogaine and Ayahuasca help tremendously with bringing to the surface some of the unconscious things that have been trapped and memorized by the mind and body, such that you can be set free of them and start to establish relationships with people that are that of connection and not that of a perpetuated, triggered cycle. So if you have any questions about what Ibogaine or Ayahuasca and or what 5-MeO-DMT does for PTSD in terms of helping it to be expunged from the body, please give us a call, 619-830-0982. And we'll be more than happy to guide you through the process and answer any questions you have. You can also visit us at the website www.ibogainedetoxrehab.com. And we would love to help move you and facilitate moving you in the direction of life that you want to travel, where you can be happy and free.